Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hi all, you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that highlights and talks about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. My name is Matthew and I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by Dhanika, who's a new addition to our team here. How's it going, Dhanika?
Yeah, not too bad. How's yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. So our topic today is the National Construction Code as it relates to SDA and kind of defining what is the NCC as well as what is SDA. But first, Dhanika, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I joined here not too long ago. I'm currently studying media and communications, and I was looking for a position that's sort of relevant to my degree, and a recruiter brought this vacancy to my attention, which, it really stood out to me because not only was it relevant to my current studies, but it brought back like a lot of my past experience as well, which really made me feel like nothing I'd done before or learnt was wasted. So,
yep, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, sorry. So I'll clarify a bit actually.
Tell us a little bit about your background.
I've studied a range of degrees, so like architecture, IT, business, and I had like experience in sales, design. I've had on-site experience in construction as well. Plenty of customer service too, and did some data analytics and insights as well. And the list goes on really.
Yep.
A bit of an all-rounder, you know. It's sort of why Min hired me as well, because he wanted me to like apply myself to kind of various roles. So I've done like, a bit of IT support in the office. And yeah, my main role though is marketing and sales. So brings in, my media and comms degree for that.
Excellent. Awesome. It's great to have you here. And as mentioned, today we're talking about the National Construction Code. Yeah. So Dhanika, what is the NCC or National Construction Code?
So it's basically, it is a national construction code, and it's basically any building that goes up needs to comply with this code and be built to a certain standard that like is defined by, different classes of building, for instance. So basically every building has to be classed within this code, depending what it is. So for houses, for instance, in this case, we mostly go through like classes 1A, B, 2, and 3 because it's residential.
Who would this apply to? Who would it, be relevant to, I guess?
Mainly builders and architects and such, I guess. So anyone in the construction industry putting anything up for approval. Yeah, basically.
Excellent. And in terms of those classes you mentioned, would you be able to, I suppose, briefly go through what they are, or the ones which are relevant in this case for housing, I suppose?
So these are classifications for residential buildings. And so there's class 1A, which is a single dwelling that is not above or below another dwelling or another class of building, other than a private garage. Class 1B, a boarding house, a guest house, or similar that is no larger than 300 meters squared, and it typically can accommodate up to 12 people. And then there's class 2, the residential part of a building with multiple dwellings, where dwellings are above other dwellings or above another class of building, again, other than a private garage. And class 3, a residential accommodation building for unrelated people, including things like hotels, dormitories, boarding houses that are larger than that permitted for class 1B. And class 3 also incorporates residential care buildings. Residential care buildings are like buildings that are not hospitals or other public buildings, and are also not class 1A, 1B, or 2, where like 10% or more of people who reside there require assistance for daily activities. So like showering and dressing, and would need physical assistance to evacuate a building if in an emergency situation.
Okay. Yeah, I might just got an article here, so I might just go through some examples of kind of what 1A, 1B, 2, and 3. Yeah, just some examples. So a house or a townhouse where one or more people with a disability reside, typically on an ongoing basis, that would class as 1A. Boarding house that is no larger than 300 meters squared and typically accommodates up to 12 people with a disability, that would be class 1B. An apartment in which a person with a disability resides, typically on an ongoing basis, class 2. And a boarding house that is larger than 300 meters squared and or typically accommodates more than 12 people with a disability would be class 3. And a final example, a respite care building that is not a class 1B building, providing accommodation for people with disability who require a caregiver for daily activities and would require assistance in evacuating a building, would be class 3, as you mentioned before. So I suppose something that people have talked about in the community is whether, I've given some examples there of class 1A, 1B, 2, and 3 all being potentially under the disability umbrella. But some have argued that all SDA should come under class 3. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, okay, first of all, definitely not. I think the mistake people are making is because class 3 specifies disability care and things like that. But again, you can still have, for instance, like the SDA regulations, the specifications that you get for certain types of houses. So like the IL, the fully accessible, the high physical support and robust builds, they have their own specifications. And this is probably where there's a bit of confusion because like these are two different sets of standards, but they're both relevant because they both apply to these houses. They are separate but relevant. So for instance, like you can have a robust build, which doesn't actually fit the class 3, which is smaller than 300 meters squares, for instance. So it'll fit one of the other classes, but it's still going to comply with the SDA regulations. It can still have all those specifications built in. So in that sense, it will still apply to the NDIS scheme. And so basically,
Yes, it's still covered. So it's covered, essentially it's covered under the NCC.
Yep.
But whether or not that makes it an SDA, everything needs to be covered under the NCC, but it may or may not be an SDA depending on the individual design guidelines and requirements stipulated by the NDIS, I suppose.
Yeah. And also, but that also means it can still be a class 1AB or 2 building. It doesn't have to be class 3 just because it's disability specified. It can still have those disability specifications in compliance with the SDA, but it can be a class 1B, A or B, or class 2 building as well.
Excellent. Yep. And I suppose on the SDA side of things, if people wanted more information, they could go on the NDIS website and download the design standards for SDA dwellings, and that would give them more information as it pertains to SDA, what makes an SDA home.
Yeah. And generally, if you speak to me on the phone, I'll email that to you directly as well.
Yeah.
I think everyone kind of should be looking at that. Yeah.
So in summary, could you kind of give a summary of what we've spoken about today? It's just been a short episode, but yeah.
So yeah, basically we went over the classes defined by the NCC, the National Construction Code. It covered class 1A, 1B, class 2 and 3 types of buildings. And we also discussed basically that these are all building types that can be SDA housing as well. But they have to basically comply with both these codes and the SDA design specification to be compliant with the NDIS, basically.
Excellent. And so the NCC sets the minimum required levels of safety, health, and amenity and accessibility for buildings in general. And obviously, this may not suit the needs of a particular person with a disability. And then the SDA design standard specifies building features for SDA beyond those specified in the NCC to cater to the different needs of people with disability that people with disabilities may have, such as building access and utilization. So this article also says that similarly, developers of SDA may choose to voluntarily implement enhanced building safety features beyond those specified in the NCC to enhance safety for the intended occupants. So, for example, as we mentioned before, the SDA design standard notes that it's desirable that sprinklers be provided. We've mentioned that in previous episodes. It is actually, however, it is mandatory in WA, and we expect it to be mandatory in all states at some point. So this is a voluntary inclusion for additional safety features, and it would be in a Class 1B building, but that doesn't mean that the building should be classified as one where these features would be mandatory, and such it should remain Class 1B.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, so I hope this has been informative to people out there, because we have received a few questions relating to how NCC relates to SDA. So essentially they're two different things. All buildings should comply by the NCC, but specific to go above and beyond in terms of design guidelines, design requirements of an SDA, that would be something different. And an SDA can qualify as all classes of NCC, but it just has to qualify to the design standards stipulated by the NDIS. Thanks for joining me today, Dhanika.
That's all good. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. We will join you on the next episode. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.